from the Bitcoin and crypto point of view, this is about more than just tipping people over Twitter, isn't it?
Kelly, I'm back. Did you miss me? Yes, Kelly, it is. They are integrating other monetary networks, but let me make this point abundantly clear. The Bitcoin monetary network is the only global monetary network that they're integrating, and it is the only global monetary network to ever exist in human history. You're talking about a monetary network that can achieve digital bearer instrument cash finality instantly and at relatively no cost anywhere in the world at any time. You combine that with one of the biggest internet networks in Twitter, and all of a sudden you have absolute payment disruption that's been a long time coming, and I'm proud and excited to see it.
Jack, would there be anybody who doesn't want to be tipped in Bitcoin? Number one, I'm just, again, just because in the U.S. it's property, there's more tax implications. It's more complicated. So even though the Lightning Network may facilitate the transaction, it is still property. There are still some headaches there. And separately, what would you say about strikes? Can this feature even be used in New York? And I forget which states. I'm not sure if you guys have full licenses for yet.
Yeah, well, let's revisit, Kelly. Last time I was on here, we talked about the division between Bitcoin, the asset. This is this commodity-like, precious metal-like asset. And then there's Bitcoin, the network. This is a monetary network, like the Visa network, like the PayPal network, like the Western Union network. And it achieves monetary functions on a global network, instant global cash finality. So I'd like to divide those two, Kelly. And what we do at Strike is we escrow and settle the value globally, instantly, and at no cost, and allow you to interface with just dollars, just Japanese yen, just euros. So actually, in the Twitter Tips product as it is today and as it's rolling out as we speak, nobody's touching Bitcoin. We're just using Bitcoin to make tweeting at someone as easy as sending money at someone anywhere in the world, anytime, any place, any currency. It doesn't matter, right? So there needs to be a conceptual division of the network, which stands alone in its disruptive innovation for Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, than just the asset. You don't need to touch the asset to gain benefit from the network.
Let me ask you two questions. You've used the phrase a couple of times, instant global cash finality. I don't know what that means. Those sound like terms of art, which is fine. I know it's from the world you live in and not the world I live in. That's number one. But number two, where the hell are you? You look like you're in an empty warehouse or something. Where are you, man?
Everybody knows that modern day innovation is built out of a giant empty women's closet.
Yeah.
I can't tell if that's a rhetorical question or not.
That's what I was wondering. It looks like an empty woman's closet. Or not an empty woman, but an empty closet. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, you're a smart guy. Don't doubt yourself. That's exactly what it is. Now, here's what instant global cash finality means at relatively no cost. A Western Union payment can take 0 to 8 days. Remittance to small emerging third world countries can be upwards to 50%. Why? Can the dollars that are sitting in my pocket in this women's closet land in another country in less than a second at no cost? No. How can any money do that? It has to be natively digital and bearer. That is the innovation of Bitcoin. Close your eyes and picture an actual physical Bitcoin traveling across an ocean, across a globe, across a continent, a border, and landing in a physical place instantly and at no cost. Bitcoin as a digital asset is the first money in human history to enable that. And it works everywhere in the world. What the internet did to communication in enabling instant communication protocol and a singular open standard for communication for the entire planet, Bitcoin network is doing that for money. You're going to see a grand dematerialization of all of these independent monetary networks that have fixed costs, credit risk, counterparty risk, balance sheet float. I'm talking about the Visas, the MasterCards, the Western Unions, and they're all going to get dematerialized onto a one singular global monetary standard that can perform settlement instant, perform settlement at no cost, and perform settlement in a borderless fashion.
Wo ich bin, Sparkasse auszahlen, gib den Scheck und lass mich da was draufmalen. Wo ich bin, Sparkasse auszahlen, suche noch nach Kleingeld, muss noch etwas rauskramen. Wo ich bin, Sparkasse auszahlen, steuerst du nichts bei, tja, dann muss ich dich halt ausladen.
No way I'm stopping now. Gonna make my way right through the clouds. I rise. I'm gonna grit my teeth and bear the pain. Gonna climb this mountain once again. I rise.
there is a stigma attached to related party transactions in public companies. Rightfully so, because Alameda was a related party to FTX, and FTT was a related party. So Sam Bankman-Fried is the issuer of FTT, is the owner of Alameda, a hedge fund, and is the operator and owner of FTX. Those were three related parties. The reason that there's a stigma is if you took FTX public and you said, by the way, FTX accepts FTT, which is a related party issued token, and it does business with Alameda, the question that a skeptical investor would have is, well, since the same person controls all three, is it possible that he actually wired the systems to give himself an advantage? And if it turns out that Alameda has $1 billion trading loss, will Sam Bankman-Fried, the CEO of FTX, liquidate Alameda in order to protect the interest of the other customers? Or will Sam not liquidate them to protect his own interest? He has a conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. And we know how the story ends. By the way, the other question would be, since Sam has billions of dollars, $8 billion worth of FTT token, will Sam, the CEO of a bank, issue credit against the $8 billion of the token that he issued himself and give himself preferential treatment? Or will there be an arm's length transaction? So here's an interesting question, Daniel. If you were an arm's length, if this was an arm's length relationship and there was a disinterested financial executive running FTX, how much credit do you think they would have extended Alameda for $8 billion of FTT token?
Nowhere near what they did.
Yeah, we know they gave them billions and billions of dollars of credit, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe up to $10 billion of credit.
Well, how much did you get as a bona fide MicroStrategy CEO when you were in the market trying to raise cash, right? There's the direct comparison that we can use.
Yeah. If I were to go to a bank and say, I have some locked MicroStrategy stock, will you loan me money against it? They would say, no, zero. If I went to them, zero, right? The answer, by the way, to the question is a disinterested CEO of a crypto bank that was honest and competent would have lent Alameda somewhere between $0 and $10 million.
Right.
One can argue that a lot of these model portfolios that worked over the last 10, 20, 30 years, whether that's the 60-40, risk parity, are no longer going to work in the future. So how should investors think about how to invest in a high inflation environment? How can they diversify their portfolio well?
Yeah, so I think it's important to contextualize that for the last 40 years, really going back to 1981, when interest rates were around 20%, you had a regime where stocks and bonds were inversely correlated, right? So as equities, anytime there was an economic downturn, the result would be the Federal Reserve and global central banks would come in and they would lower the cost of capital to ease financial conditions. What this did was it actually, when you lower interest rates, bonds and interest rates are inversely correlated. So the value of your bond portfolio goes up, and as the cost of capital goes down, other assets respond positively, right? Money is cheaper. So anytime equities saw a downturn, bonds saw an uptick. So this risk parity, this is kind of coined by Ray Dalio, a billionaire hedge fund manager, one of the most successful ever, kind of made his career on this trade of stocks and bonds being inversely correlated. And so 2021 happens, the everything bubble, the sovereign debt bubble, global debt levels are higher than they've ever been before. And now, this inflation seemingly came out of nowhere, right? So now we have a stock bond correlation crisis, where everyone floods to fixed income or is fully allocated to fixed income, and okay. There's no protection in sovereign bonds. So I think really what we're seeing now is it's a sovereign debt bubble unwind, and even if in nominal terms bonds appreciate again, what's happening is we've already seen the peak of bonds in real purchasing power terms, and I don't think really people fully comprehend the implications there of bonds as fixed income as an asset class. basically offering negative real yields going forward.
Yeah, and that's so important to negative real yield, right? And one of the things that shocked me is just the volatility of these bond yields and the movements there, and the Fed, how aggressively they're going around this hiking cycle. And so, Preston, what does that do for the real economy? If I am an entrepreneur or a business trying to plan and model out into the future, how are operators supposed to perform economic calculations and allocate resources effectively in this environment where the money is being manipulated so aggressively and so fast?
I think the simple answer is they just build risk premiums into the price of everything to try to offset that risk. But let's pause there. Let's talk about how, when you look at models and you talk about all your models are destroyed, you know, branded by Michael, which is completely 100% accurate. All the models are destroyed because when you talk about at the crux and the keystone of economic calculation, it starts with inflation. And when you manipulate the cost of capital for 40 years, what's happening that's not discussed in the actual economy is what you're doing is you're destroying competition because you're stepping in and you're having market consolidation happen in the quote unquote free and open market. And what that does is it removes the biodiversity of competition amongst vendors. So let me give you an example. Maybe you had 10 companies that used to supply part widget A, right? So over time, over 40 years of these types of activities, it goes to 7, it goes to 5, it goes to 3. And now one of those 3 vendors gets killed. Now you only have 2. Well, all your models for just-in-time supply chain management that were optimized for Lean Six Sigma or whatever, you know, operational metrics you want to use for these super hyper optimized, low-cost ways to do business and connectivity amongst the world starts to break down. What happens is you don't have 1 or 2% inflation for, you know, the things that most people are accustomed to going out and buying, and it starts to creep in, and then that compounds, and then all of a sudden you're not dealing with 1 or 2% inflation in this basket of things that people were telling you to look at. You start seeing 5%. Then you see 8%. And then it starts getting to the point where, my God, is it going to be 10 or 20% next year? And so that's how it arrives out of quote unquote nowhere, is because a lot of the financiers are talking about things, but they're not talking about what's actually happening at the grassroots and at the small business or mid-cap business level with respect to supply chains. So then when you're talking about economic calculation that's being constructed off of this idea of quote unquote inflation, and you're doing you know, free cash flow, you're doing free cash flows on top of inflation and hurdle rates of inflation, you can see how the model, all your models are destroyed at that point. And that's hard for a lot of people that don't have a degree in economics, maybe aren't actually you know, an operator or managing a large company, to be able to see both sides of this and to see why the bond market, as James described in great detail, is completely unwinding itself. And I don't know that, you know, people talk about the end game. Are we in the end game?
I would say
maybe we are.
We have stepped into the end game. And here's the problem, right? So what Preston's describing as this inflation that becomes entrenched, okay? So the Fed's model is broken. The Fed is supposed to try to keep full employment and manage inflation to keep it acceptable, right? So now you're in an environment where we have 130 some odd % debt to GDP in the United States, okay? The problem with that is that we're running at a deficit. We're running at right now a run rate of $1.1 trillion deficit in the United States, okay? So that means that we have to issue $1 trillion, $1.1 trillion of bonds right now in order to meet that margin. Okay, but you're now issuing those bonds at an interest rate that's going up, right? So you're issuing bonds at an interest rate that's going up, which means you have to pay more interest, which means that your gap, your deficit is going to grow. That means that the next year you have to issue more bonds, right? So if you just look at where we are right now, I was speaking with my partner, Larry Lepard, before we came up here, and if you just pro forma out, which means that you just project out what it's going to look like next year, right now we're running $1.1 trillion of a deficit. If you add in $600 billion of tax revenue that we will not receive this year because of the one-time tax haven or tax benefit that we had in 2020 from all that money printing. Well, if you take that and know we have to print that, then you know, or we have to issue debt for that, then you know that we have $400 billion more of interest expense this year, plus a cost of living adjustment on Social Security and mandate programs, okay, of $150 billion. I mean, you're talking about a gap now that's $2.2 trillion next year. So we have to issue another $2.2 trillion of debt just to meet that. This breaks the Fed's model. They cannot raise rates at the rate that they want to and keep them where they need to bring that inflation down. And so it's a feedback loop that they will just allow inflation to run hot in order to raise GDP nominally, get a larger tax base nominally, and be able to pay down that debt.
And when you're talking about it being recursive, going back to this idea of consolidation of enterprise. So as they step into the market to fill that gap by just printing it, they're then feeding that lack of biodiversity among the competition in your free and open market, which just compounds on itself. And so what I think is often not discussed is when you look at the Fed and their actions right now, and any central bank's actions right now, they're trying to suck the demand out of the system. But the thing that nobody's talking about is maybe on the supply side, they're destroying the supply side so fast that it's actually outpacing the demand suffocation that they're trying to do to slow down the economy. And if that's actually playing out, you're not going to see prices drop like they've seen for 40 years when they do these raising of rates, because this is a different scenario now.
You might be wondering what a story about Bitcoin is doing in the middle of nowhere. And I mean nowhere. With towns like Wink, named after the fact that if you blink, you might miss it, this vast region of West Texas, widely known as the Permian Basin, is not exactly the Big Apple. But that doesn't mean it's not important. In fact, its primary export is the cornerstone to life as we know it. Energy. That's right. West Texas has energy for sale. Lots of it, and it is cheap. And where there's cheap energy these days, you're bound to find these things pop up like suckerfish. These are Bitcoin miners, specialized machines custom built to solve complex problems to earn that magical internet money that we're all really tired of hearing about. Wow. The old saying's true, everything really is bigger in Texas. But despite this vast expanse of panels, solar and other renewables remain an intermittent power source that doesn't even come close to satiating Bitcoin's appetite. To do that, Bitcoin miners need to buy power from sources with a surplus of energy. And believe it or not, there's quite a few options around here. So where are we going now? It's a substation. What does that mean?
This is a substation that we are going to be taking power from. There's a lot of excess power out here that just is available, but is not being utilized at this time. So,
what were they, or I guess, what are they currently doing with the excess?
Nothing.
So it just goes into the ground?
Right.
This type of power is known as stranded energy, and it's quite literally energy that has nowhere to go. And this is what occupies a lot of Justin's time, finding sources of stranded or excess energy and capturing it. He's doing a deal with this substation that has too much energy. They literally cannot give it away before they have to let it go.
This is the Owl Hill substation, and it's going to be a 40 megawatt site here.
So this is like the giant outlet in the wall that you're going to plug your Bitcoin, your computers into.
Yeah.
The sources of stranded energy are as diverse as energy itself, and a true energy hunter finds power from places you couldn't dream of. What are we actually going to see?
So we're going to go to a well site that has a flare stack on it. But these wells are not economic from selling natural gas type standpoint, but they can be economic for us to go mine Bitcoin on because the amount of gas the required to mine is so small.
So like when you see that, can you just imagine Bitcoins coming out of there?
I'm coming right out of the top.
Money, basically?
I'm catching them. I got a basket to run around with.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist, I'm just an actor, to understand that capping flared gas and turning it into energy is a lot greener than releasing it into the atmosphere. But there's a huge but here. Much of Bitcoin miners' current operations plug straight into grids that power homes and offices. A lot comes from non-renewable sources like natural gas and coal. Not only that, but Bitcoin's energy demands could potentially strain the grid's output, taking power away from residents who need it, especially in times of emergencies. In February of 2021, an ice storm brought the state to its knees, overwhelming the power grid, causing it to shut down.
No heat, no water after this first storm, and it's been deadly.
246 people died. Today, we're in the midst of an insane heat wave. In fact, the day we filmed this, almost every Bitcoin miner in the state had to shut down to accommodate peak demand for energy. Can a state with such serious energy concerns really afford to sell their power to Bitcoin miners? As it turns out, Bitcoin maximalists have an argument for why their intense power demands on the grid is actually a good thing for energy stability.
They're not putting the Texas grid at risk. They're actually stabilizing the Texas grid. There is a balance that is required for the grid to continue to operate. And it's a very small tolerance that you can get above or below. The benefit of Bitcoin mining for the grid is that you take your base load from this to this. When you keep your base load higher, when you do have a peak demand from residential use because of a storm or whatever, it's much easier to already just start curtailing your power away from the Bitcoin miners. They shut down, and it is diverted to the residential use.
Did you get all that? Yeah, neither did I. So I decided to zoom in for a second opinion with independent energy consultant Doug Lewin.
Is the grid and are the energy sources capable of supporting all of the growth in crypto?
So I think the answer is a firm maybe.
And what it depends on is good regulation. And of course, Texas is not necessarily a state that has a reputation for being good at regulating anything, unfortunately.
Well, women's bodies.
So you have to keep things at 60 hertz. If a plant drops, your frequency drops. You need something to balance that. You have to balance supply and demand at every second. I do think large flexible loads, whether that's Bitcoin or others, have a lot going for them if, and this is a huge if they are using clean sources of energy to power their operations, and if they will shut down when things are getting tight on the grid. I would like to see us be able to integrate Bitcoin miners, not because I care a lot about Bitcoin mining. I don't. What I care about is, in order to get Texas to a place where Texas is the leader in low polluting, low emission, clean energy, we are going to need a lot of large flexible loads. If they can do it, then we've got a template for these other large flexible loads to enter the market.
And that is how, in a perfect world of fulfilled ifs, Bitcoin mining's constant exponential demand for power can help stabilize the energy grid and drive innovation towards sustainability. Man, Bitcoin miners really are the suckerfish of the energy sector. But here's the thing. Despite their unfortunate name, suckerfish keep the big fish clean, all while getting what they need to survive. Sure, yeah, it's kind of parasitic, but at the same time, it's elegantly symbiotic. In a weird way, that's what Bitcoin miners are proposing to do to our power grids. Let's not forget that guys like Justin are still a minority in this space, and that even if he was to use only renewables, he wouldn't make much of a dent in the estimated 73 million tons of carbon dioxide per year that Bitcoin mining emits. Maybe we should coin a new phrase here, like sucker coins or fish bits, or not.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we could stop talking about Bitcoin?
Look, I know Bitcoin's pretty annoying, and you're probably hoping it just goes away. But so long as dudes like Justin think they can get rich from mining the stuff, it's probably here to stay. And if there really is a chance that mining this stuff can help stabilize our grids, then maybe we should give the suckerfish a chance.
I don't trust the Fed. I don't trust the Treasury.
Yeah.
And the definition of money is a unit of account, a store of value, and what's the other one?
Medium of exchange.
Yeah, exchangeability.
Yeah.
So the dollar is a declining, is being depreciated and otherwise being spent or printed out of existence, or at least Bitcoin, which I don't understand very well, but I know via design is designed to hold its value.
Mm-hmm.
And so I buy gold, silver, and gold and silver to me are God's money. So I've started a gold mine, I've started silver mines. I have millions in gold and silver stored in vaults outside the US. I don't trust my government for confiscation, as you know. But when I looked at Bitcoin, was talking to guys like you and Max Kaiser and stuff like this, I'm going, I got it. It cannot be diluted, cannot be printed away. And so when I see what Biden is now, in 2008, they borrowed 700 billion, and now it's 7 trillion.
Yeah.
God almighty, you're still saving money.
Right.
You're crazy.
And more to come.
Yeah, it cannot stop.
No, it accelerates. Yeah, it accelerates until the currency breaks down completely. So that's interesting. You actually look at gold, silver, Bitcoin as an insurance policy, effectively.
Correct, a hedge.
So you're monitoring your cash, net cash flows are determining whether something's an asset or liability, but you have to actually hedge the cash itself because it's being depreciated by the Fed and Treasury.
Correct.
But it was Bitcoin that showed me what money is really about. It answered one very simple question for me. What is money? What is it? We're here about money, right? Let's face it, this is all about money, and there's nothing wrong with that. Money is the free circulatory system of humanity. It is human work encapsulated to transcend time and space, and that's a beautiful invention. Thank God for money. It's awesome. I can do my work here, and I can take my work and my value and trade it for anything, anywhere in the world. Beautiful invention. Why isn't it working, though? Money is broken. Why is it broken? Who broke it? Why? And how we can fix it.
He's been diving since 4 in the morning.
This one's going to be big. It's a website where you can buy Bitcoin, but you can't sell it.
No sell button.
Only one button.
It's like a Coinbase, but way better.
You can't even transfer Bitcoin off a site. You have it though, trust me.
It's pretty much a cold storage wallet.
It's an honor system.
This is the best def. Better believe it.
What type of person would need a personal computer today of the type you offer?
Well, it gets back to the question of what is a personal computer again. Again, another analogy. There was an article in Scientific American in the early 70s which compared the efficiency of locomotion for various species of things on the planet. In other words, they measured how much energy it took for a bird to get from point A to point B compared with the energy it took a fish to get the same distance, and a goat and a person and all sorts of other things. And they ranked them. And it turns out the condor won. Condor was the most efficient, and man came in with a rather unimpressive showing about a third of the way down the list. It's somewhat disappointing. But someone there had the insight to test the efficiency of man riding a bicycle. And man riding a bicycle was twice as good as the condor, all the way off the end of the list. And what it really illustrated was man's ability as a tool maker to fashion a tool that can amplify an inherent ability that he has. And that's exactly what we think we're doing. We think we're basically fashioning a 21st century bicycle here, which can amplify an inherent intellectual ability that man has and really take care of a lot of drudgery to free people to do much more creative work.